It's a pleasure to see so many Chinese friends here today and to have the opportunity to reflect on one of the global security challenges that we as human beings face today, on what the American statesman Adlai Stevenson called our shrinking planet. I am Bruce McConnell, Global Vice President of the East-West Institute, or EWI. EWI is an independent NGO that works to reduce international conflict, address seemingly intractable problems that threaten world security and stability. It's 35 years old, with headquarters in New York and offices elsewhere in the world, including in San Francisco, which is where I am based. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the context of the cybersecurity question, which is one of many transnational issues. In fact, U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice observed in 2013 that today's most vexing security challenges are transnational security threats that transcend borders: climate change, piracy, infectious disease, organized crime, cyber theft, and the modern-day slavery of human trafficking. To that, you can add migration, violent extremism, safety of fissile materials. These issues share at least two characteristics. First, they are accentuated in their severity by modern technology. The bad guys, both state actors and non-state actors, are well equipped with the latest computers, communications equipment, and weaponry, and their ability to use these tools is enhanced by their access to global networks. Second, for these issues that transcend national boundaries, there are no effective international regimes or institutions that have these problems in hand. Instead, we see organizations like the World Health Organization on infectious disease or the International Telecommunication Union that need reform. They can be slow, bureaucratic, and even suffer from corruption. They are struggling to remain relevant. The post-war structures that have kept relative peace for 70 years face a crisis of legitimacy as rising powers that were not present at Bretton Woods scorn the old order and create their own institutions and power centers. Today I will focus on the security and stability of cyberspace. Two great powers, China and the US, share a great responsibility as leaders. These two countries must demonstrate right behavior in cyberspace. They should act as models for other countries. Fortunately, we are able to say there is progress, but much more needs to be done. Cyberspace is a global network where electronic information moves quickly to accomplish many purposes: financial and other business transactions, social interactions on platforms like WeChat and Facebook, state-on-state espionage, and criminal activity. In some ways, it's like another network, the air traffic system. You're all familiar with the provisions of keep the network secure. You have identity proofing of everyone who gets close to a passenger plane. You have licensing of pilots, filing of flight plans, certification of aircraft, etc. We have none of these things in cyberspace. Yet the financial value of commercial transactions conducted over the internet, and I'm not even counting bank-to-bank transactions on SWIFT and other special networks, is actually 100 times greater on an annual basis than the value of goods transported in the air cargo system. In commercial aviation, we have organizations like the private sector International Air Transport Association and the governmental International Commercial Aviation Organization that partner to maintain safety and security on a global basis. There are no comparable organizations for cyberspace. Finally, norms of behavior and international law apply in the airspace. It is illegal to shoot down a commercial aircraft. But in cyberspace, representatives of 20 countries, including China and the United States, agreed only last year at the non-binding experts level that states should not attack each other's critical infrastructure using cyber weapons in peacetime. Indeed, we are in a global cyber arms race, led by the United States, Russia, China, Israel, and some European countries, with many wannabes, including Iran and North Korea, following close behind. Non-state actors such as organized criminal gangs and the Islamic State are rapidly closing the gap. This arms race differs from the nuclear arms race of the last century. First, the good news. The scale of potential damage from even the worst cyber attack is much lower, whether measured in physical, financial, or human terms. And here it's worth noting, as James Clapper, the United States Director of National Intelligence, did in his most recent global threat assessment, that the most devastating cyber attack would not be shutting down the electric grid, but corrupting the data that flows through the international financial system. Unfortunately, we have seen examples of both attacks in the last 6 months, with the partial shutdown of the grid in the Ukraine and major cyber threats attacking the SWIFT network. Second, access to powerful cyber weapons is much easier than assembling a nuclear device. Cybercrime as a service is a vibrant industry with weapons bazaars hosted on the unsearchable dark web and on servers based primarily in Eastern Europe, and attack infrastructures that can infect or disable millions of computers available for rent by the day and paid for using bitcoins. Third, the private sector is much more powerful in cyberspace than in the nuclear space. Major companies, primarily US-based, have a much greater say in what goes on in cyberspace than most sovereign states. Fortunately, some of those countries, including sponsors of East-West Institute, Microsoft, and Huawei Technologies, are taking seriously the responsibility that comes with such power and working with us and others to develop and promote norms of industry behavior. Finally, in cyberspace, there is much more significant danger of miscalculation that could lead to escalation. It is very hard to tell in real time who is responsible for a cyber attack, and relatively easy for a bad actor to make it appear that an attack is coming from somewhere else. This is why communications between governments is very important. If this were not enough, there are new sources of risk all the time. You are all familiar with the US lawsuit of Apple versus FBI, and the concern by law enforcement that it will be unable to prevent, investigate, or prosecute crimes effectively because critical evidence will be locked up on someone's smartphone. On the other hand, encryption is an essential tool to keeping one's business information and one's personal information secure. The encryption debate is in its early stages. In fact, last week, EWI co-hosted a 130-person meeting with the European Police Agency, Europol, in The Hague last week on this topic. We brought together both sides of the debate from several countries, including India, to search for middle ground solutions that serve security online and security offline. EWI will continue working on this issue in the months ahead and will issue policy recommendations in late 2016. A second source of emerging risk in cyberspace is the so-called Internet of Things, or Internet of People. By 2020, there will be 10 times more devices, such as Fitbits, heart monitors, automobiles, thermostats, machine tools, and floodgates connected to the internet than there are phones and computers. And these devices will be shockingly insecure. They are sold with easy-to-guess passwords, transmitting their data in the clear, and unable to be modified when vulnerabilities are discovered in their operating systems. This is a concern primarily in critical infrastructure, and we are also investigating this year. Part of the technology problem has been that until very recently, nobody wanted to pay for security. Customers bought information technology based on price and features, and industry responded. Today, customers are starting to ask for security, and the market is beginning to respond. However, as yet there are no standards, there is no underwriter's laboratory to help buyers evaluate the security characteristics of information products and services. EWI will be addressing this problem in July with a release of a buyer's guide for secure information technology products and services. Before I turn to China-US relations, I want to go back to the area of cyber norms. As I mentioned earlier, one promising recent development is the agreement of a United Nations group of governmental experts on a series of norms of state behavior. They include not attacking each other's critical infrastructure, assisting each other in responding to cyber incidents, taking responsibility for cross-border cyber attacks emanating from servers in one's own territory, and not using computer incident response teams for offensive purposes. These norms, along with the general norm that some aspects of international law actually apply in cyberspace, demonstrate that states are starting to recognize the destructive power of cyber weapons and the importance of building regimes that can limit the potential damage. Much more needs to be done here, and I'd be happy to discuss our ideas later in the session. We need to work together to develop and promote the implementation of cyber norms of behavior that would apply to governments and also to companies. China and the US share a great responsibility for enhancing the stability and security of cyberspace. These two countries must demonstrate right behavior in cyberspace. They should act as models for other countries. Fortunately, we are able to say there is progress, but much more needs to be done. The first area of work is the bilateral relationship between the two countries. As Michael Jackson says, we must start with the man in the mirror. China and the US have a great history of cooperation together, and also periods of conflict. My own father was a flying tiger during World War II, and so I naturally tend to focus on the side of helping each other in times of adversity. Our two countries have a huge economic relationship that is critical to both, and we are both committed to creating a stable environment for international trade and avoiding unnecessary conflict or escalation. In cyberspace, we are making progress. Last year, our two presidents agreed to avoid certain kinds of cyber attacks on each other. Since that agreement, the level of attacks has decreased. In fact, the two sides are planning to meet again next month. Secretary Meng Jianzhu and his US counterparts are expecting to discuss additional measures to build confidence and solidify the agreement in detail during a full day of meetings in Beijing. The current agreement between the two countries is a good start, but much more hard work is needed to get a reasonable level of confidence. Second area, the two countries are working together successfully on a multilateral and multi-stakeholder basis. I mentioned earlier the member agreement among the 20 United Nations group of 20 nations UN group of governmental experts. This is very positive. Last week I was in Moscow meeting with the principal Russian negotiator of this group, and like the Chinese and American teams, he is committed to making additional progress when the group meets again later this year. This time with additional countries, including, importantly, India, being at the table. And as you heard in the last panel on ICANN, there is also progress on internet governance. It is time for the US to turn the administration of the global internet infrastructure over to an international body that recognizes the roles of companies and governments in making it all work together. Of course, the two countries do not agree on everything, including on the degree to which information should flow freely. This difference reflects on our histories, our cultures, and different forms of government. They are different, and we must respect each other's differences while continuing to cooperate and avoid attacking each other. For that reason, I'm very happy to be here and to talk with all of you to increase our mutual respect and understanding. Thank you.